بفضل الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خير خلق الله أجمعين محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في محكم كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ووضع الكتاب فترى المجرمين مشفقين مما فيه ويقولون يا ويلتنا ما لي هذا الكتاب لا يغادر صغيرة ولا كبيرة إلا أحصاها ووجدوا ما عملوا حاضرا ولا يظلم ربك أحدا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. The book will be set up, the book of your deeds. Then you will see the guilty, pitiful and apprehensive of what is in it. They will say, woe to us, what a book this is. It omits nothing big or small without enumerating it. They will find present whatever they had done, and your Lord does not oppress anyone. This is the month of change. This is the month where we can really work towards changing ourselves and changing our inner self and learning about the composition of ourselves. Now, when people talk about change and how can we change for the better, some people say you can't change, that a person is the way that he is. He was created that way, he was born that way, there are certain biases that he has, there are certain things that he believes in, and so they say this is the way I am. Sometimes you have this problem when people are trying to find a spouse for marriage, and when they're getting to know each other, the prospective groom or bride will say, for example, he wants me to change, I don't want to change. He should love me for the way that I am. Or, the guy will say the same thing. This is the way I am. If she likes it, take it or leave it. This is the deal. My way or the highway. When realistically, this is not the case. In fact, we have been placed on this earth for the purpose of that. لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. To test of you which is the best of doers. In fact, this argument is much broader. It's not only something we argue Islamically, but something in the secular and scientific world, the known argument of nature versus nurture. So this argument, nature versus nurture, it's a huge scientific discussion where there has been many experiments where they are trying to come to a conclusion that does a person, for example, that's a son of a criminal, grow up to be a criminal? Is this always the case? And a person that's the son of a good person, the person that's the son of a alim, grow up to be a good person? It's not always the case. However, they think that if they're set up for this, this is what they will become. And there have been many experiments that people have done. There's one that's quite interesting. It's mentioned in a book called Freakonomics, which talks about behavioral economics, which is a very interesting subject. Behavioral economics and biological evolutionary behavior are two very interesting topics regarding the behavior of a human being. And in this book, they start looking at they make a study of calculating the names of children and how that affects them by the way that they are named. And it's a big study and they talk about various things, but there's just one small point I wanted to bring up. There was a man that called his son winner and loser. Okay? He actually called one of his sons winner and one of his sons loser to see which one becomes, or what would become of them, how would it affect them. Some people do this. They experiment with their children. In fact, a lot of the earlier psychologists would do that. They would experiment on their own children to work out if something is viable or not. And so what ended up happening with winner and loser? Well, winner spent his lifetime in jail. He kept committing crimes all the time, and he ended up with a huge rap sheet. And loser ended up becoming a commander in, I think in the NYPD, in the New York Police Department. He became a police officer. And in fact, his name was, Captain Loser. But everyone that saw him would see his name tag, and they'd call him Lou or Lossier, for example. They'd change it a little bit because it's hard to call someone loser, even though that's their name. So one of them became, someone that's a respectable vocation in the culture, and the other one became someone that's completely unrespectable. And he had an undesirable future. So the thing is, if these people are born in the way that they are, is it possible for us to achieve some sort of change? And so some people argue that no, even in the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَكُلٌّ يَعْمَلُ عَلَى شَاكِلَتِهِ, and say each one does based on what they are. And obviously this has a deeper meaning within it. But for some people, there's even a hadith of the Prophet where he says, خَيْرُكُمْ فِي الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ خَيْرُكُمْ فِي الْإِسْلَامِ, which is an interesting narration. It says the best of you during Jahiliyyah are the best of you during Islam. So perhaps this narration, I'm going to get fact checked. Perhaps this narration, خَيْرُكُمْ فِي الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ خَيْرُكُمْ فِي الْإِسْلَامِ, that some people had some good attributes. For example, Hatim al-Ta'i. Hatim al-Ta'i was someone that was known so much for his generosity. And some people, they just had good attributes about them even during the Jahiliyyah. And then when they turned to Islam, these good attributes just went on during the era of Islam. And some of them who were lowly and undesirable and they were bad people in the Jahiliyyah, subhanAllah, in the era of Islam, you see that the majority went like this. So is this the case? The thing is, it's not exactly. And even when you look at the science of nature versus nurture, it's not exactly. That a person, although he may have feelings and desires, it all depends on how his intellect can balance these feelings and these desires. So every person knows what he is. You know what is within you. For example, if somebody is someone that's a sweet talker and he has a greater desire towards women than others, then try not to get a job where you're going to mix around with women, for example. Try not to be in situations where you're going to do that. Or if someone, for example, when he gets money, I remember there was this guy, he says, once money goes in my pocket, it doesn't come out. I'll negotiate, I'll sell a different product, but that money coming out of my pocket is too hard. And this particular person has a story where he nearly got beaten to death because he had money and he just copped the beating and held on to the money so he doesn't get beaten. But the point is, some people, this is how they are. If that's how you are, then do something that's away from money. If you have an ill temper, for example, don't get a job or don't put yourself in that position. This is part of managing your change and how to become a better person. When we understand what we are and who we are and what our limitations are, this in essence helps. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us this ability and opportunity, and it's all based on us having that ability to change. In fact, the human being is better than the angels. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the angels intellect. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the animals instinct. But with the human being has both instinct and intellect. That he has instinct and he has intellect. If his intellect overpowers the instinct, then most definitely he is better even than the greatest angel. If his intellect is able to overpower his instinct, then he is greater than the angels. But if his instinct overpowers his intellect, then he is lower and worse than the angels. Inshallah, we'll go into a little bit of detail for this. But ultimately, it's all about discipline. The way that you discipline yourself, this is what you will be. The way that you place opportunities in front of yourself, and the way that you place yourself in environments where you can thrive and environments where you can keep away from sin and do good things, this will allow you to overcome and to have the ability to enact and enable change. In this holy month, for example, we have the opportunity to fast. We have the opportunity where our dua is accepted. If you look at the daily dua for every day, it is so short. The smallest actions yield the greatest rewards. The smallest actions yield the greatest rewards. If a person, for example, recites Surah Inna Anzalnahu fi Laylatul Qadr at iftar, and then he recites Surah Inna Anzalnahu fi Laylatul Qadr at suhoor, it covers what's between the two. if he says, for example, if he just makes a small dua or any dua, if he recites a verse from the Holy Quran in this month, it's like he read the whole Holy Quran with one ayah. That's it. And in some narrations with one letter of the Holy Quran. So within this environment, you have that ability to change. But it all requires discipline. And so even the way that, for example, we raise our children, it requires that degree of discipline, just the way that we raise ourselves. As we grow, as adults, we need to discipline ourselves in a manner that it can enact and enable change. One of the greatest proofs of the fact that a human being can change is we know that animals act only on instinct. And yet even the most ferocious of animals is tameable. It's tameable. They still have that same source. So for example, a lion, they tame him for a circus. And every now and then the lion goes back to being a lion and he attacks his trainer. But as long as the certain things are in place, it keeps him on par. It keeps him on par. Even the dog, for example. Dog is known as an unruly animal. It is known for that. A dog wants to start a fight with every other animal around it. And yet we see when they train dogs, ajallakumullah, you see a dog can be trained, may it be far from you, can be trained in such a way that it does of the most amazing actions because it gets disciplined in this way. And sometimes what it is we need to keep these factors. For example, you might say this person was born to a criminal family, or a person was born to a bad family. And so how can this person change and get away from this? Because some people, it's just by habit. Al-khayru aada wa sharru aada. Fata'awadu ala al-khayr. The Holy Prophet says, goodness is a habit and wickedness is a habit. So make yourself get used to what is good. Some people, they are raised in an area where they can't do anything bad. And habitually in the family that they're raised in, everything they do is good. They know verses of the Quran, they know all these sorts of things. But once these elements get taken away, we don't know where they fall to. And this is what's difficult. This is what discipline is about. So for example, water. By nature is cold. Now if you apply heat to the water will begin to boil. As long as that heat is there, the water continues to boil. The second you take that heat away, it drops. It's just like a person that's pious. But he prays, he recites the Holy Quran, he is away from things that are haram. He's away from things that are haram. But the second he stops praying, or the second he starts to go to environments that are not good, he goes back to his original source condition. One of the examples the ulama love to use is the example of fahm, that coal. So if you get a piece of coal, it's black and it has nothing. But if you heat this piece of coal, slowly, it will become warm. It will become hot. And then eventually it will become so hot that it goes from black to red. When it becomes red, it then becomes a source of the fire. When it becomes a source of the fire, that's it, it's set. And as long as it stays that way, it's fine. It'll keep reproducing that heat. These are of the physical world examples that we can see that change is most definitely and truly possible. And we see it also in the spiritual world. How many of the companions and the people that were around the Holy Prophet and the people that were around the Imams changed? For example, in the coming days, we'll be celebrating the birth of Imam al-Hasan al-Mujtaba, salamullahi alayhi, ala dhikrihi, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. And the story of the Shami, the Syrian man that came to see the Imam. And that man came, and the Imam's akhlaq towards him. The man came and he told him, he swore at the Imam, and he swore at the father of the Imam. And the Imam salamullahi alayhi treated him with such kindness and dignity that the man completely changed. Why? Because the main issue that he had is that he was fed false news his whole life. And the Imam was able to rectify that. We see the story of Al-Hurr ibn Yazid al-Riyahi. And take him as an example with someone like Umar ibn Sa'd. This person who was on the day of Ashura, on the plains of Karbala, he stood against the Imam, salamullahi alayhi, and he enacted and executed the murder of the Imam and the family of the Imam. And we see Hurr bin Yazid done the exact opposite. Now, if you have a look, they give us some insight into what was happening in their mind. So Umar ibn Sa'd, in his mind, he was saying that I need the city of Ray, I need the governorship of Ray. This is all that matters. If I'm the governor of Ray, everything will be awesome. Everything will be set. And this is all he could see. And then the insight into Hurr bin Yazid, he says, أخير نفسي بين الجنة والنار. He says, I see myself standing between heaven and hell. And by Allah, I will not give up heaven over anything. And therefore he turned and he changed. Now, the composition of our nafs, of the human being, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alludes to this within the Holy Quran. He talks about al-nafs al-mutma'inna, and al-nafs al-ammara, and al-nafs al-lawwama. The nafs al-mutma'inna, from this they derive a few extra things. They say al-nafs al-mutma'inna, or the contrite self, is the one where the intellect has power over all the other powers. So within you, they narrow them down to 4 powers. One, they call it al-quwa al-aqliya, which is the power of the intellect. That's the most powerful thing you have. This is what the ruh powers for you. This is what changes your nafs into what you want your nafs to be, what Allah wants your nafs to be. And this is the nafs that will remain with you from here until eternity. If the aql can keep everything else balanced, it's good. The other 3 powers that you have is one, al-quwa al-ghadabiyya they call it, which is basically the faculty of anger. Wal-quwa al-shahwiyya, the faculty of desire. Wal-quwa al-wahmiyya, the faculty of imagination. The faculty of imagination. These 3 things, they power everything else, and they're instinctual, other than the aql. They're instinctual. So for example, the power of desire is instinctual. If we didn't have desire, we wouldn't procreate. If we didn't desire the opposite gender, we wouldn't procreate. And if we don't procreate, as you can see, and one of the biggest problems we have in the modern world today is what? Is the decline in population. People are not having enough babies. And that mentality is coming towards us. It's coming towards the believers, unfortunately. The believers are thinking the same way, and they're no longer having large amounts of children. And this is definitely a problem. But if it wasn't for this desire, we wouldn't have that. Now, if you misuse this desire, if you go extreme with this desire, what happens? You fall into sins, licentious sins like zina, wal-'ayadu billah, fornication, adultery, things like that. This is when you misuse it. Self-abuse, when you misuse that desire. The second one is the faculty of anger. Faculty of anger is important. You need to have the faculty of anger. If somebody doesn't get angry at all, there's something wrong with them. They're not functioning on all cylinders. That there's something there's a misfire. They can't possibly do it without getting angry. Why? That power of anger allows you to push away what is bad. That power of anger allows you to defend yourself from anything that harms you or your family. And this is why we have it. It's important to have it. But when it's abused, what happens? We begin to see others as lesser than. And when we see them as lesser than, we treat them accordingly. We treat them badly from that power of anger. And the last one, the power of imagination. The power of imagination is important. Why? This is what allows you to think about abstract ideas. But at the same time, this power is the power that allows you to feel envy. This is the power that allows you to plot against people. To say, you know what, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to destroy my competition. So I'm able to move forward. Now these 3, left unchecked, these 3, that are part of an-nafs al-ammara, an-nafs al-ammaratu bis-su', that this nafs, this wicked, demanding self, or what can be referred to as your inner 3-year-old, your inner 5-year-old. It's demanding everything, and it's demanding everything all of the time. Our aim is to have the intellect overpower these 3 and use them for only what is correct. This is when it becomes nafs al-mutma'inna. It becomes a contrite self, a contrite heart, that it has that ability to command all of these and take them onto the middle path. This is how they're meant to be. Because each thing, inshallah, we'll go through each emotional disease. Each emotional disease has a positive and a negative and a middle ground. A positive and a negative and a middle ground. So for example, if we were to take the faculty of anger, anger has a middle ground. The middle ground is it gives you enough anger for you to defend your family and yourself. It gives you enough zeal over your family to say, all right, no, you can't do this because it's going to harm you. You can't do that because it's bad. If it's overused, you become abusive and you begin beating your family up or you begin beating people up. And if it goes the opposite way, it becomes so bad that a person, for example, won't have any zeal over their women folk. They won't have any zeal or ghira over their women folk, and they'll be, oh, she wears what she wears, what can I do? I can't do anything about it. She goes wherever, she's got 3 guy friends. What can I do? It's very hard for me to do anything about that. So the issue is that if you overuse this or you underuse this, it becomes problematic. Now, inshallah, over the coming nights, we'll start to go through certain elements of these emotional diseases and learn about them and understand, inshallah, how we can change or make them better. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Why is this knowledge important? This knowledge is very important because every knowledge is weighed against what benefit we get out of it. So for example, if you look at all the different knowledges, usually the knowledges that are looked at as the best and the highest are mathematics and science. And currently, I think in the curriculum for the HSC, there's no mathematics. You can opt out of mathematics. It's not compulsory anymore. But mathematics and science are at the top because these 2 things are required, for example, for engineering. The other sciences aren't looked upon as highly. Everything else, the humanities, so the social sciences, the humanities, history, English, geography, the rest of it, it's looked at as lower. And then you've got the vocational, that's even looked at as lower than that again. This is obviously for some cultural purpose and what we see as being more beneficial than something else. So mathematics is beneficial because it allows you to enter the world of finance and it allows you to enter the world of engineering and the sciences and science and so on and so forth. So if someone, for example, is very knowledgeable in biology or horticulture and he can grow plants, it's important because we need to grow plants so we can eat food. But if there's no humans to eat the food, obviously it's useless. So that knowledge has a scale, but a knowledge that is better and higher than that is, for example, the knowledge of medicine, veterinary medicine. Because you need to have the animals so we can have meat to eat and we can use the animals as modes of transport and so on and so forth. And then higher than that is medicine of human beings. So if someone studies the medicine of human beings, that's held even higher. Why? Because the fruit of it is it allows human beings who get sick to become healthy and to live. And this is obviously more important than finances, and it's more important than technology, and it's more important than horticulture, and it's more important than veterinary science. But the highest level of knowledge is the divine knowledge, knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and knowledge of the soul. Why? Because even if you have all of these things and you've lost your soul, then you've gained nothing. When Imam Abu Abdullah al-Hussein and Imam al-Sajjad asks in the dua of the day of Arafah, "Oh Allah, I ask you for something. If you give it to me, then whatever you deprive me of will not harm me. And if you deprive me of it, then whatever you give me will not benefit me. I ask for you to free my neck from the fire of hell." That even if you have the best life in this world, if you live like a king, imagine being someone that's a superstar, a sports star. You're the best footballer there is, or the best basketballer. Everyone around you worships you, basically. And you live this fantastic life, or you're a king, and you own everything. The narration says that one look at the fire of hell and you will forget all of the good that you had in the past. Or if you live the most difficult life, that you're born into poverty, under a corrupt regime, You spend your life in a dungeon and you end up dying and no one ever hears about you again. You don't even get a proper burial. But one look at paradise and you will forget everything before that. So other than these two most important things, nothing else really matters. And this is why that knowledge of your nafs is paramount. Why? The verse we said at the beginning talks about that when the books are set up. We all have a book. Everything that we do, every action, the narration says that even when a woman blows on the fire to heat up the fire when she's cooking, that gets registered as an action. You blew on the fire. Why? That gets registered as an action. That every action that we do, the books come out, and every action that you've done is registered. Not only that, the earth bears witness, the heavens bear witness, the kiram al-katibin bear witness, the angels that are upon you bear witness, people that were around bear witness, the hujjah of your time bears witness. Everyone bears witness, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has it written, other than you writing it in your grave. So he says, when the books are set up, you'll see the guilty مشفقين مما فيه ويقول يا ليتنا. He says, يا ويلتنا ما لهذا الكتاب لا يغادر صغيرة ولا كبيرة إلا أحصاها. That when they see this book, they say, woe unto us. This book has not left anything out. Which means what? Every action that you've done, everything that you've thought of, everything, and I'm not saying you get judged for your thoughts, but when you think and you plot against others. And particularly, see, sometimes we, and this is particularly, specifically for the brothers and the sisters. I really hope the sisters are listening to this. This is really important, particularly for the sisters. Because generally, sisters talk much more than the brothers. They talk a lot more. This is a scientific fact. You can sometimes even see it in the animal kingdom. You know, there's pictures where you see a bird shouting at another bird, and you can guess the gender even without being a botanist. And so the sisters really need to hear this. The sisters really need to hear this. We hear about sins like zina, and we're like, yeah, nah, not going to do that one. We hear shurb al-khamr, alcohol, nah, I'm not even going to go near that. Why would I even? We're so far away from it. But then in that same realm is the sin of ghiba. Backbiting, talking behind someone's back, saying words that may destroy a person's reputation in public. Saying one or two words may change the whole future of that person. And yet we just blurt it out. I just need to say this, I need to say that. And we say it. Alhamdulillah, it's Shahr Ramadan. You probably don't meet as often and you can't have your gossip sessions as often. But it's important that you look into this and say, all right, what am I saying? On that day, everything is going to be revealed. There's going to be a reveal. A serious reveal where everything will come out. These people say, oh my God, she was my best friend. I can't believe. Was this what she really thought of me? Or this what she was saying about me? And same thing, they're going to come and point at you and say, is this what you said about me? And all of this is going to come out. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَمَا تُجْزَوْنَ إِلَّا مَا كُنْتُمْ تَعْمَلُونَ وَتُجْزَوْنَ إِلَّا مَا كُنْتُمْ تَعْمَلُونَ. Oh, He says that you would be rewarded, or you would be, recompensed with what it is that you did. Not a part of what you did, but it's what you have done. The Holy Prophet, he says that during your life, you have something that is with you. It's a living thing and it stays with you the whole time. Until you leave this world. It gets buried with you, you are dead, and it is alive. What is it? This is a long hadith, I'm paraphrasing. He says, this is your actions. And if your actions were good and honorable, then you will be honored by it. And if your actions were dishonorable, then you will be, if your actions were mean, then you will be treated meanly by it. And that is your deeds. Your deeds. They're with you the whole time. This is why this knowledge is important for me to understand not only what is good, but I need to understand what are the bad things. I need to understand the opposite, so I don't fall into that. Something like ghiba is huge. Some of the narrations about ghiba, I can't even bring up in this gathering. They're very, very harsh. Really harsh, but it's counted as one of the kaba'ir, one of the greater sins. And so these actions that you do, they then become personified. It says in this verse, وَوَجَدُوا مَا عَمِلُوا حَاضِرًا وَلَا يَظْلِمُ رَبُّكَ أَحَدًا. And they will find what they have done present. Your actions will come into their true form. You know how we're talking about the nafs and nafs al-ammara, nafs al-lawama, or we're talking about the power of the desire, the power of the anger. Sometimes a person, because of how he acts with his anger, we only call him human because that's what we have to designate him as a human. But really, may Allah keep you aloof from this, he is a dog. And when a person is licentious and they follow their desire, we call him human, but really he is a pig by action. And on the day of judgment, this is what will appear. The true image of what they were will appear. Everything that you do, it's like when we see in the world of dreams. When you sleep and you dream, you see certain things in a certain image, but they mean something else in the world. For example, if you're laughing in your dream, you're probably going to cry in the real world. Probably. Not always, there's rules to it, but generally. If you die in your dream, that means you're probably going to have a new life. Something's going to come into your life that's going to change it and make it better, inshallah. But if you move to a new house in your dream, bye-bye, Charlie. Or something like that. So the opposite of that, of what happens in that world, just like in this world, the things that we do when we do ghiba or we commit a sin, the personification of that thing, when that thing becomes animated in the hereafter, then you will see it for what it truly is. And when you see the action for what it truly is, it's something that's not pleasant. There was the story of the alim, and I'm sure you've heard this before, where he was sitting in a graveyard, as is the action of the ulama and the people that are near to God. They remember death. Why? That's part of those elements that keeps you on par. That even if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, you were born into a family that normally partied all the time, or you're born to a family of drug dealers, wal-'ayadhu billah, and then you change, you move out of that, you need to place yourself in that sort of environment and never, ever, ever step back into that other sort of environment. So the ulama, the history of the ulama is they would go and visit the graveyards. They would go and be in majalis al-dhikr, these gatherings of remembrance. Why? Because it brings their heart back down to earth. They realize, oh, this is what my end is going to be. I better take it easy. I better back down a little bit, bring it down a gear. And so when he was watching, he saw them bring in a body. And so he saw the people moving with it, and they came and they buried the body. And while he was watching, he smelt this beautiful smell. So he looked around and he saw this handsome man dressed in white robes walking towards the grave. He was astonished. This is after the people had left. And then that man in the white robes entered the grave. He said, this is very strange. He said, as I was watching, I smelt the most terrible smell. The smell that makes you feel like wanting to retch, to throw up. He says, I saw this beast. It was like a dog, a black beast, and it stunk. He said, so I watched it, and it also entered the grave. He said, a bit of time passed, and I saw the man that was dressed in the white robes come out, and his robes were torn, and he was bleeding. So I said to him, who are you? You just came out of the grave. He said, I was the good deeds of that person. And he said, who was the black dog? He said, the bad deeds of that person. He said, and what happened? He said, well, we had a fight in there. And inside the grave, he won, so he remains with that person till the day of judgment. Nastajiru billah. This is just a vision that he saw. I want to narrate to you and just take a few more minutes of your time, inshallah. And this is a story that helps us understand that what it means to enact proper change within yourself. What's the purpose of it? The Holy Prophet says the believer is like gold, that he needs to be tested with fire. This is what happens to the believer. He's like gold, pure gold, better than pure gold. He gets tested with fire to prove that this is what he is, and inshallah he attains paradise. So one day, Nabi Isa alayhi salam, al nabiyina wa alihi wa alayhi salam, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. He was traveling with his companions, and they came across a treasure. So his companions said, we will wait here with this treasure so nobody takes it. Nabi Isa says, I'm going to get a true treasure. And he continues down and enters this village. In that village, he finds a house. There is a woman who seems to be living alone. He says, can I be the guest here tonight? She says, yes. He says, is there anyone else living in your house? She says, yes, my son. He is an orphan. And he goes out and he collects nettle. And then they sell it. They dry the nettle. They use it as fuel. It's like a spiky plant. And so he says, I will stay as a guest. He's collecting the nettle. And he returns. The young boy returns and he sits with Nabi Isa. Nabi Isa starts to speak to him and he notices this boy has intellect and he has potential. And this is the whole point. The whole operation of us doing tazkiyat al-nafs, purifying the self, is to allow our hearts, because all of our hearts are vessels, to allow our hearts to be able to take in the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the love of Allah, the love of the Holy Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt salamu alayhim. That this is the whole point. If you don't have that purified, you can't take it in. You hear the Quran, you can't be bothered. It was like this guy was asking, he used to listen to music. And music is one of the worst things. Inshallah, maybe we'll have a topic on that by itself. But he used to listen to songs and music because it's an intoxicant, ultimately. It well and truly is an intoxicant. And the more you research into it, the more you'll be shocked. But I don't want to take away from the story that I'm speaking of. So the point is, when he was listening to this music, Alim Din came from overseas, so he wanted to ask him, he said to him, why is music haram? Why is it haram? So the Alim Din thought, he said, I can give him a comprehensive answer with all the narrations and everything. He said, but you know what, I'm just going to give it short and sweet to him. He said to him, when you listen to music, he says, yes. He says, can you then be bothered to read Quran or listen to dua? He goes, no, of course not. He goes, that's it. Stop it. Simple as that. It intoxicates you away from what is good and what is right. This is what this is about. So Nabi Isa alayhi salam, we're back in the story. He's in the village. The boy comes. He's talking to him. He sees that the boy is distracted. His head is somewhere else. So he says to him, what's your problem? Tell me, perhaps I can help you. He says to him, okay, I'll tell you my story. The boy doesn't know who he is. He's a guest that's staying at their house. He says to him, I'm an orphan. I go and collect nettle. One day as I was collecting nettle, I was passing by the king's palace and I saw his daughter, the princess. She was so beautiful and I am in love. He said, I can't think of anything else. Either I marry her or death. There's no in between. This is the only way I can move on with my life. And so Nabi is a simp, haram. So Nabi Isa alayhi salam, or he's acting like one anyway. Nabi Isa alayhi salam says to him, Nabi Isa alayhi salam says to the boy, go tomorrow to the king's palace, ask for a hand, come back and tell me what you need and I'll get it for you. He says, please don't mock my broken heart. As if. So the Nabi tells him, go, he goes. This is narrated, by the way, it's of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, this story. And so he goes to the king and the guards are outside. He says, I need to talk to the king. I want to ask for his daughter's hand in marriage. So they have a good laugh, excellent laugh. Look at this poor kid. He's wearing nothing. He's in tatters. Send him in. They send him in. They say, the king, we've got you some entertainment. So he walks in. He says, I want to ask for your daughter's hand in marriage. And they all have a laugh together. Like, it's the most crazy thing. So the king says, I'll play your game. You want my daughter's hand in marriage? This is what I want. Get me this many pearls and this many rubies and this many gems, and starts asking for all these things. You know what I mean? Sort of like asking for $1.24 million and the number of amount of profits there is, and as a dowry, and I don't know how many houses and whatever. So he asks all these things. So the guy comes back depressed. He says, you told me to do this. This is what I've done. Now I need to get these rubies and these diamonds and these gems. And Nabi Isa says, come with me. He takes him to these ruins and he raises his hands in dua. And the ruins turn into gems instantly. So he says, collect what you need. So he walks down, starts collecting the shopping list, how many rubies and gems and whatever. Goes back to the king and he says, look, I have bought them. The king is astonished. So he tells him, tell me, where did you get this? How did you get it? I'm cutting it a little bit short. Where did you get this? He says that we have a guest and this is what he brought forth to me. The king realizes the guest is who was prophesied about, that there was a prophet coming. He says, okay, you can have my daughter. The king had no sons. He told him also, I want you to be my heir. I want you to be the king after me. You're wali al-ahd. So he signs over the kingdom to him. 2 days later, the king dies. The boy becomes king. He's married to his princess. Everything is going fine. Nabi Isa alayhi salam goes to leave. He comes and he says, I just want to bid you farewell before I leave. So the youth says to him, wait, before you go, last night I was thinking. He said, what were you thinking? He says, I was thinking that you made dua at ruins and made all of these gems. Why don't you do it for yourself? Why would you do it for me and then walk off? You can't even afford to stay somewhere. You had to stay as a guest at our house when I was poor. He says to him, because the person that's attached to the akhirah sees that this dunya is useless. Why? Because it's going to perish. It's going to finish. Everything that you have in this world is gone. It's going to go. The only thing that will remain is wajhullah, the face of Allah. Meaning any action, good action that you've done for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In some traditions, the Ahlul Bayt salamullah alayhim. Yani any action that you've done for the Ahlul Bayt salamullahi alayhim, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is all that will remain. And everything else will go. Every other good deed that you've done with half an intention, with whatever, it's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. The only thing that's going to remain is what's with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and everything in this world is gone. And so, Nabi Isa alayhi salam, when he tells the man this, the man thinks about it and says, you know what? This is true. What he's saying is correct. And so, he leaves the kingdom. He says, I no longer want to be king. He abdicates and he goes with Nabi Isa alayhi salam. Nabi Isa comes back with him towards his companions and he says to them, I've got my gem. This is my treasure. You guys found this treasure of gold and whatever. This is the real treasure. And this is the whole point of this operation of purifying the self. It's about becoming that gem and that treasure. Like the ones that we hear about, like the ones that we read about, to be able to enact that true and serious change within us, inshaAllah, and to become true servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and inshaAllah ansar of Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman, ajallahu ta'ala, farajahu sharif. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have mercy on our dead, to cure all of those that are ill, particularly the ones that are within this majlis, Al-Hajj Abu Ammar, and his daughter and his granddaughter, and Al-Hajj Hassan Talib and his wife, and everyone else that's ill. That forgive me if I don't know your names, but these are people of them that have asked for dua. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cure all of your sick and clothe them in the clothing of well-being, inshaAllah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all of your deeds, fulfill your debts, have mercy on your deceased. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma kun liwaliyika الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وهب لنا رأفته ورحمته وخير ودعاءه. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أعوذ بجلال وجهك الكريم أن ينقضي عني شهر رمضان أو يطلع الفجر من ليلته ولك قبلي تبعة أو ذنب تعذبني عليه.